Since the Occupy Wall Street movement began nearly a month and a half ago, there's been more and more focus on the top 1% in America and who exactly these people are who control nearly half of all the wealth in America. And while the usual suspects are the banksters on Wall Street, people like J.P. Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon, Goldman Sachs CEO Lloyd Blankfein, or Bank of America CEO Brian Moynihan, all of whom make enormous multi-million-dollar paychecks. The real greed monsters on the 1% don't reside on Wall Street at all. Meet the top 1/100th of 1%, America's war profiteers who are making enormous bucks hurtling our nation into one war after another. People like Northrop Grumman CEO Wes Bush, who made more than $22 million last year, and Lockheed Martin CEO Robert Stevens, and Boeing CEO James McNerney. Both guys who collect a salary that would make banksters green with envy. The Brave New Foundation has just launched a new campaign to expose the 1/100th of 1%ers in America. Take a look.
The CEOs of the biggest military contractors are at the head of the pack. These war industry CEOs use their company's massive lobbying budgets to corrupt Congress and keep their gravy train rolling. These CEOs' businesses boom when wars drag on for decades, while the rest of us pay the price.
Derrick Crowe joins me now. He is the political director at the Brave New Foundation. Derrick, welcome.
Thanks. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Thanks for joining us tonight. What motivated Brave New Foundation to expose the 1/100th of 1%ers?
Well, we wanted people to understand who they're talking about when they're talking about the 1%, and we've got a larger campaign that'll talk about that at Brave New coming up in the next couple of weeks. But we thought that people would be really surprised. You know, you're used to thinking, like you said earlier, of people like the head of Goldman Sachs or Bank of America, and they don't realize that the people who are behind the lobbying pushes to keep us in wars longer than we need to be, or to start wars we don't need to be in the first place, are making so much money that they're actually in the top 100th of 1%. And if you look at the top 10 of the Pentagon's largest contractors that make the most money at the Pentagon, the CEOs of 7 of those 10 companies are in the top 100th of 1%, and all of them are in the top 1/10 of a percent of U.S. household incomes. It's really egregious.
This really very much is the military-industrial complex that Dwight Eisenhower warned us about in his 1961 farewell address. How is it different from how it was before World War II?
Well, there's one big difference, I think. It used to be embarrassing in America for politicians or the heads of these companies to talk about the economic impacts of war profiteering as a jobs program, which it's not, by the way. But that used to be a slur to say you were doing political engineering when you put together a contract, because it rightly carried with it the connotation that you're sticking these factories all over the country in an attempt to win business, and not to do the best job for the federal government, but to win business in those districts and win an advocate from those congressional districts in Congress. That has totally changed in the last couple of decades. In addition to the massive amounts that these companies spend lobbying, they inject little pieces of their business into each congressional district so they can basically blackmail a member of Congress and say, you've got to vote to approve this contract, and you've got to become an advocate for it in Congress, or we're going to run ads in your district that say you're costing local jobs. But that larger argument is false. We've shown in our past videos at War Costs, and you can find them at warcosts.com, that military spending is a jobs killer. Compared to almost any other kind of spending, and even compared to just regular old consumer spending, the jobs that are created by military spending are many, many times fewer than the other kinds of spending.
Yeah, it's just kind of common sense that if you spend money, if you spend $1 million building a bridge or a road, that's going to serve a school, it's going to serve the nation for decades. If you spend it building a bomb and drop it on somebody in some other country, it's gone. Franklin Roosevelt famously said during World War II that he would not allow there to be not one war millionaire as the result of what he referred to as the current difficulties. And he put Harry Truman in charge of a Senate committee to oversee the war contractors to make sure that literally not one war millionaire was made out of World War II. Now we've got these war millionaires, you know, basically bragging about it, living high, you know, fancy pants. What has happened in the psyche of America?
I mean, can you imagine any president or any current politician giving a speech where they say not one more millionaire is going to be made as a result of this war? I think that embarrassment that you're going to make money off what FDR called this war disaster, because it is a disaster. It's not something that ever makes any society stronger. It always is about tearing down. The idea that it's an embarrassment to run off, it's basically a gigantic version of what's called ambulance chasing, right? Like, can you imagine, you know, any politician standing up to that? I think that has been the real change in the psyche here. These companies have been so effective at using the money that they mostly get from us, right, from the taxpayer. Almost all these companies get almost all of their money from taxpayer-funded contracts. They've been so effective at taking that money, shoving it both into media campaigns and into lobbying and campaign donations, and turning this system against us, really. They're taking that money and translating it into billions more in profits every year than they're spending on the campaign and lobbying investments. That they've basically done a great, huge information ops on the American people. So we now typically think of military spending on contractors as jobs programs, which it's not. We think of it as enhancing American business, which it's not. We've talked to lots of economists at the War Cost Project, and we've learned from them that because military spending is sucking R&D and brain power out of civilian pursuits that are actually more productive, we're actually hurting American competitiveness around the world, and that's intolerable, and we've got to stop it.
How do we do that?
Well, the first thing people can do is call the representative right now and tell them that you want the deficit committee, if they're going to make cuts, to make cuts that'll cost us the least jobs. And military spending, since it's a job killer in general, is where they've got to cut if they're going to cut something. They cannot allow these other social programs that lead to more productive economic activity like Social Security and Medicare to be cut at the expense of the military budget. The second thing people can do is check out our site at warcosts.com and on Facebook at facebook.com/warcosts, where we're constantly putting out new videos that expose the 0.01%, but also the real damage that's being done to our country, and get your friends involved. Because like you said, the psyche of the country right now is part of the problem, and we've got to break through this propaganda spin that somehow military spending equates to economic activity. It really doesn't.
Derrick, thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
So very well said. Time to put the 1/100th of 1% out of business, or at least bring them down to the 1%. Anyhow, end our wars and bring our troops home.